Hey everybody, an old man's talking.
Welcome to Nerd Thoughts. I'm an old guy, and here are my thoughts. Today, we're going to be doing my top 5 favorite comic book artists. And this is going to be heavily influenced by the 90s and the early 2000s, and especially by the comic book influences that broke off and traded Image. And a lot of it will be influenced as well by who I met. Sometimes that sways my opinion. And I met a lot of artists when I worked at Atomic Comics. We had tons of signings in the early 2000s. So let's get into it. Number 5, Marc Silvestri. Marc Silvestri is known for having this gritty, dark drawing style with heavy inks. Marc got his start really with Wolverine and Uncanny X-Men with Marvel. He even drew the iconic Wolverine Mail to the X that made it into the Wolverine Deadpool movie. And his Wolverine was pretty cool. It had that kind of like giant mane. And a lot of people didn't like that style. He's more animalistic and just this hulking little beast. But I loved it. I thought it was awesome. And I definitely loved the Infernal Saga as he did with Uncanny X-Men. You can see him here with Sinister. And when he broke off and went to Image, he did Cyberforce, which I actually don't like. Cyberforce was pretty bad, and the coloring, it was just way, way saturated. That time period in comics, they were like just learning how to, I guess, do computer coloring, maybe, and it was just, a lot of them looked awful. But they moved on to do stuff like Witchblade and Darkness, and I loved his Darkness. His Darkness is where he really became dark and gritty in comparison to his older stuff. And that dark style made him a really good Batman artist, in my opinion. And he did Batman for a little bit. And I actually never met him. It was just crazy because I've been to Fan Fusion the last 2 years here in Arizona, and he was there both times, and every time I went to his booth, he was never at his booth. It was always somebody doing a sit-in. And he did a signing with Chris Claremont, and by the time I was going to go back for that, the lines were just outrageous. I was nope, not doing that. And I met so many artists and creators, and they come from a time period where you didn't charge for signatures. You might have charged for like a sketch, but when we did signings at the comic store, they never charged anything. It was just a part of the deal. And some of them didn't do sketches, but a lot of them did. The idea of like waiting in line and like these giant lines for Chris Claremont and Silvestri and paying like $150 just for them to scribble their name. I just don't do that. That's just not my thing. Number 4 on my list is going to be Todd McFarlane. And of course, everybody knows Todd McFarlane. He drew Spider-Man for a long time. He has the iconic cover that made to the Spider-Man Brand New Day. And of course, create Spawn and went to Image. Spawn, I loved Spawn when he came out. It was one of my favorite Image comics. I loved the style that was just so unique in those Spawn comics. And then of course, the Spawn cartoon came out on MTV, I think it was. Gosh, it's been so long. Maybe it was HBO. And of course, his toy line, I bought a lot of his toys. They were huge when they first especially came out. Obviously, he's iconic and he's a total businessman. And I've actually met him twice. One time I was working at the movie theater near where he lives now at Tukey, and I was turning tickets, and he comes up with his 2 daughters to go see Spice World. And he wasn't very covert because he was literally wearing a Spawn jacket. And I was like, hey, Mr. McFarlane, how you doing? He just goes, hey, how you doing? And that was our whole interaction there. And then the second time I met him was at the Spawn premiere for the movie. And the movie was in Ahwatukee at the movie theater my brother was the manager of. And so the movie was playing. We were waiting outside the theater, and the movie's over, and a bunch of guys are coming out. And I'm waiting there at the exit doors inside the theater. And this guy goes, hey, who are you guys waiting for? We're like, oh, I'm waiting for Todd. He goes, oh, Todd's out. He went out the back door. All the big guys went out the back door. And so I just turn and I book it around the building. And it's funny because I was running. I'm like, that was Dale Keown. I almost positive Dale Keown sold out all the other artists that were there. He's a big Hulk artist. He's another one of the founders of Image. He did Pit, but I'm almost positive it was him. He had that mullet even. And so I'd book it around, and I come out the exit doors, and they're all back behind by the dumpsters, basically. And there's like 4 limos. I'm trying to get between 2 limos, and this security guard blocks me. He just stops me. I'm like 2 feet from Todd McFarlane's wife, and she's yelling at him. She's like, young, we need to get to Planet Hollywood. You can't stop and sign signatures. And there's a whole line of kids waiting for him to sign, and he's signing them. And he's like about 10 feet from me, and his leg's like 2 feet from me. And this guard won't let me pass because he just wanted me to pass between the limos and walk behind Todd. And all of a sudden, Todd McFarlane's wife turns to me and starts screaming at me that we don't have time for this, get out of the way. And I'm like, holy crap. All of a sudden, someone grabs my shoulder and turns me, and it's Martin Sheen. Like, I shit you not. Martin Sheen's like, what's the matter? Why? What's going on here? She's yelling at me. And I go, oh, I'm trying to get Todd McFarlane's signature. And he goes, oh, okay, come with me. And then the security guard moves out of my way because now I'm with Martin Sheen. We walk over to Todd McFarlane, and Martin Sheen's like, hey, Todd, can you sign this for my good friend? He goes, what's your name? I tell him my name. Sign it for my good friend. Todd looks up, just a surprised look on his face. So that was kind of a cool experience to have Todd McFarlane's wife just yell at me. So number 3 is going to be Humberto Ramos. He was actually not well liked or received when he first hit the scene because he had this like urban art style with big feet and kind of an anime-looking style to it. And I remember him getting announced to be the Spider-Man artist because I think he started Amazing, but he did Amazing and Spectacular, both of them. He eventually went to X-Men and he did Young Justice. I knew him originally when he was drawing this comic called Crimson. And Crimson didn't sell very well overall. I liked it at the store that I worked at, and another I liked it at the other Atomic Comics. So we sold a lot of Crimson from our store, and I was very vocal about it. What was one of my favorite comics at the time. And so I can't remember if it was for the first free comic book day or the second free comic book day, is when he was about ready to start drawing Spider-Man, and the owner of Atomic, he just got off the phone with Joe Besada, and he asked me if I wanted to get Humberto Ramos to come because he's about ready to start drawing Spider-Man, but he hadn't drawn it yet. So he's kind of on the fence about getting him out there because none of the Spider-Man fans would know he was going to draw because he hasn't drawn it yet. He had just done Crimson, pretty much. That's what he's best known for. And I was like 100% get him out here. And I kind of felt bad for him because he did a lot of sketches that free comic day, and he did sketches for little kids because none of the real fans of like Spider-Man knew he was a Spider-Man artist yet. So afterwards, after free comic day, he'd sit in the back room and he's just and I'm apprehensive about asking him to draw a couple sketches for me because I want him to draw one for me and for the other fan of the other comic book store. He did it, and he did an amazing job. He hadn't been drawn any of his Crimson stuff. He was just drawn Spider-Man all day. So they drew me an amazing Joe, who's my favorite character, and he drew an amazing Scarlet, which was the other person's favorite. And a cool thing of that too is he was waiting for his plane, and he was sitting in the back room for a while, and he asked the owner if one of us could take them to like Best Buy because he lived in Mexico, and if he lived in Mexico City, and he couldn't get a Game Boy. Like Game Boys are really hard to find there, I guess. And so he wanted to go to Best Buy to get a Game Boy. You know, I was like, "You take him to Best Buy to get a Game Boy?" And so I got paid to take Humberto Ramos to Best Buy. And number 2 is Joe Madeira, and he got really famous for drawing X-Men. A lot of people did not like his X-Men run. It was right anime style, and the colors at that time, again, were really bad. He created the character Maggot, which no one liked. I hated Maggot, and he was in a lot of issues. He left that, and he went with the Image guys, and it was another Cliffhanger guy, and he created Battle Chasers, and Battle Chasers was awesome. I loved Battle Chasers, and it didn't last for long, and he went to video games after that, and he also helped create the anime Cannon Busters. He kind of left the comic scene because I hear that a fan went to his house and bothered his wife, and it really turned him off to how crazy the fans were, which is funny because I met him too. He came to the comic book store and he was wearing a Battle Chasers t-shirt. Like, what is with these artists that don't want to be recognized wearing their own stuff? And I said, "Are you Joe?" And he's like, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah." He seemed like he didn't want to talk at all. And then I told him he gets a big discount. And he was with another guy that had a giant stack of comics. He had like over $100 of the comics. I go, "You had 25% off discount." He just grabs that guy's stack of comics and sticks it on the counter with it. And so that was an interaction. I mean, I get it. People don't want to be bothered while on the street stuff. All right, let's do some honorable mentions. I like Eric Larson. I know a lot of people hate Eric Larson. He drew Spider-Man. He draws Savage Dragon, I think, still. He's like a Jack Kirby ripoff, and I get it, but I still like him. I like I like his Jack Kirby style. I like Savage Dragon, even though I shouldn't because it's really kind of a crappy comic, but I like him. And I like Dale Keown. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I met him at the theater. I mean, he did like a ton of full stuff. And Pitt, I liked Pitt a lot. And he does that veiny, giant arms kind of drawing, but a lot of people don't like from him. His whole stuff was amazing too. And then I give a shout out to actually the artist I probably knew the most. I used to know Cory Walker from Invincible. He used to live in Arizona and was like basically homeless. And he used to like walk around all the comic book stores and draw at the comic book stores. And he's the artist for Invincible. He did the year run of Invincible. I met him on the first day Invincible was on the shelves, and he came in. He was basically trying to sell his comic. And he was like, "My comic is Invincible." And I knew who he was because the owner said, "Hey, the artist for Invincible is here. He's wanting me to push it, so they don't push it. I'm gonna get lots of issues of it because he had, told the owner about it." And so when he came in, I go, "Hey, I don't know what this is about. What's it about?" And he sold me on Invincible by saying it's a character like Superman with Spider-Man's problems, and that's how he sold it to me. And so because of the interaction, I bought the first issue. But he would come around all the time, and he knew I liked Conan O'Brien, so we would always talk about Conan O'Brien. He had this. I don't know if it ever made into the comics because I only bought the first issue, and I just read the other issues in the comic store. I didn't ever buy them, which I'd feel regretful for now because it's such a big show and it's such a big comic now. And he used to come all the time and visit, and he's been to my house a couple times. He'd hang out. We had parties and stuff like that. He'd come to the house. Cory Walker is a great guy, so I'm from the list, even though I don't really care for his art that much. He had a hard time drawing a comic. I remember him really complaining of how grueling it was to do a monthly comic and how much he hated drawing that much. Best of them all, number one, is Jim Lee. And Jim Lee, I understand, is miles above everybody else. No one even comes close to him as my favorites. His Uncanny X-Men is some of my favorite comics of all time. It's definitely my favorite X-Men comics of all time. And doesn't even have Colossus in most of them. And he's my favorite artist. Those Skrulls and the Shi'ar Empire cloning all the X-Men and taking their powers, and that whole storyline is just so good. I liked all of his Wildcat stuff. He did Batman Hush. He did Superman, Fantastic Four, Punisher War Journal. Oh my god, like his start was, I don't know if it was his very first job, but his Punisher War Journal stuff is like some of the earliest stuff he did for Marvel, and it was just phenomenal. And he's like the nicest guy. Of course, I met him once too. It was at the Spawn movie premiere. I had just got done getting Todd's signature and the limos were pulling away. And we had parked in the back because the front of the theater was so crowded, it was all full. So we had parked in the back and I was sitting on the tailgate waiting for all the vehicles to leave that were in the back of the theaters. We were right there. This group of 5 people are walking past and I see this little guy and I'm like, holy crap, that's Jim Lee. And I go, Mr. Lee? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, I love Wildcats because Wildcats had just come out. I might have plug his accent. I'm like, what is Wildcat stuff? And he was so nice. He's like, oh, you think I'm better than Todd? I'm like, oh, you're a million times better than Todd. He was like, oh, so let him hear you say that. And then I proceeded to watch him get in the back seat of a Honda, sitting Twinkie in the middle of 2 other guys, and they were probably going to like Planet Hollywood with the rest of the limos and stuff. I'm like, Jim Lee sitting Twinkie in the back of a small Honda. That's crazy. And I know you're going to be like, oh, how did you meet these guys? I understand, like, it wasn't like it is now back in the old days when it comes to this kind of stuff. I remember Mark Waid did a signing with us. There was periods of time where like be nobody even talking to him. I remember he walked over the register when I was doing the register and like he was signing candy. He's like, if you think anybody wants some Mark Waid candy, he's like signing candy because he has nothing else to do. And this is Mark Waid. Nowadays there will be a line out the door for the guy. These conventions have changed everything. Like you have to pay for everything. I mean, I met Bruce Campbell 3 times, and all I did was buy his book on his book tour, and he'd sign it. I'd have to pay for nothing. And I bought a movie ticket to Man of the Screaming Brain, and he'd sign it for free. Now he has to pay at least $40 for a signature. The scene of how anime's changed it all in it and meshed with the nerd scene, and then video games have come into play. And these conventions like Comic-Con are dramatically different. Comic-Con used to be just more of like a wild party, kind of in the early days for the creators. I mean, it was popular. Comic-Con and Chicago were a bit more popular, but all the conventions like Fan Fusion didn't exist back then. I remember I used to go to Star Trek conventions when I was really, really young, and I met like Marina Sirtis, Scotty, and they got at like Q and all this, and John France was there. They didn't charge anything. Like they would just sign things. The convention would pay them to come out, and it's not like that anymore. Like now, the writers and the artists and all that, and the voice actors, they had to pay for their booths. Those booths are lots of money, and it used to be the convention used to pay them to come out, and now they have to make the fans pay. These conventions have to be making money hand over fist. It's $60 to get in. You need to pay for every booth, and they don't pay anybody to come out. And I get that it's about the money and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, I just refuse to do it. If we all collectively refused to do it, it might change. It won't, but it could eventually go back to where nerd stuff isn't as popular as it is now, but it might not. It's just such a different thing now. When I go to these conventions, and I'm like, I'm not paying for that. Like, I'll just shake the guy's hand and call it a day. That's all I'll do. That's fine. That's my list, top 5. If you've never read any of these guys' stuff, I would highly suggest it. All right, that's it for me. If you could repost and like this, that'd be great. I would greatly appreciate it. It's a little bit long, I'm sorry. But, you know, I'm an old guy. I like to ramble. I drop some memes. Talk to you next time.